I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, I've got an idea for a new reality show. Meet the mean moms of Newcastle, Washington. Plus, the Washington State Senate is fast-tracking that House bill that upends parental rights. We'll talk about some of the testimony from a hearing today. And the State Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction ramps up threats against school districts that won't fall in line on extreme gender ideology. That and much more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello, and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Holy smokes, packed show for you today. A lot of insanity to discuss. Final live show of the week. First, as we speak, in Olympia, the debate on parental rights has made it to the Senate Education Committee, and this worries me. I mean, man, so as I told you, we had this kind of offbeat hope that in the Washington State House and Senate, they both had competing versions of a bill to upend the Parental Bill of Rights that was passed into law via voter initiative last year. And we thought, well, maybe they'll get into a pissing match, for lack of a better phrase, and neither will agree to hear the other's bill and it'll stall out. Well, clearly that's not the case. So the version that passed in the House has already made its way to the Senate Education Committee. They had a public hearing on it today. Again, as a reminder, that is House Bill 1296. And what it does is strip away key provisions of the Parental Bill of Rights that basically says, hey, schools, stop keeping secrets from parents. They have a right to know what is going on with their kids at school, whether it's something around gender ideology, they show up to school and they identify as a different gender, or whether it's a health issue, behavioral issue, whatever it is. Stop keeping secrets from parents. But Democrats really desperately want to keep secrets from parents, and they want to keep indoctrinating your kids at school. And so they passed this via voter initiative strategically last year so they could come back immediately this year and completely undo it. So the sponsor of this bill is Democratic State Representative Monica Stonier. Here's what she said to kick off the public hearing in the Senate today.
My bill before you today is student-centered, starts with what students need in order to feel successful, to have the conditions in which they can feel as though they belong, they can see themselves in their school environment, they are welcomed, so that their basic needs are met, so they can then learn. We have done this over the years for students who have no home, for students who are in our foster care system, for students with disabilities, for all of our students, for students who are undocumented and are fearful of what may be happening. We have talked for years about how important it is to make sure that every student feels that they're in a school setting where they belong so that they can learn.
Gosh, absolutely full of it. So I need to pick apart a lot of what Rep. Monica Stonier said, but it's interesting, this whole idea, and she doesn't see. There's not the self-awareness there when this is about student-centered, student-focused, student well-being, student all this stuff, student achievement. When you say that, in the context of the bill that you've put forth, you make it sound like parents aren't part of that parents aren't part of student success, student achievement, student well-being, as if parents aren't the most critical part of that. And as if parents don't have rights too. You don't get that. What you're saying exactly proves why we need a parental bill of rights, because you believe kids at any age are best left to the devices of school teachers and public administrators, and the best path forward for kids is to cut their parents out. So again, I want to just chop up a little bit of what she said so we can really understand how ridiculous it is. Let's continue.
My bill before you today is student-centered, starts with what students need in order to feel successful, to have the conditions in which they can feel as though they belong, they can see themselves in their school environment, they are welcomed, so that their basic needs are met, so that they can then learn.
Yeah, we need to keep doing what we were doing, because remember, what they want to do is go back to how our public school system was operating when it comes to the relationship between parents, schools, and kids. They want to go back to how it was operating before the Parental Bill of Rights last year. But how have our public schools operated when she said this is all about so kids can succeed? How's that working out? Not very well. Because last time I checked, our test scores are absolutely in the toilet. 72% of Washington 8th graders aren't even proficient in math. And we know when it comes to reading and science, the test scores are no different. Across the board in our state, students are failing academically. So clearly, Representative Stonier, going back to how our schools were operating pre-parental Bill of Rights isn't going to be the thing that leads to positive academic outcomes. Makes no sense. All right, let's continue with her words of wisdom.
My intention is to demonstrate that student rights, the rights to an inclusive school environment and curriculum that is historically and scientifically accurate, can coexist with the parental rights that you all have been discussing in this committee.
They want to focus on things that are historically and scientifically accurate. Ah, yes, because the things being pushed on kids that parents were so concerned about are absolutely scientifically accurate. I'm reminded of the gender wheel assignment that was given to elementary school kids, where it told them that that gender is a spectrum. It's just a wheel. A turn of the wheel can determine your gender. You could be a trans, femme, intersex who identifies as a tree. Literally a tree. According to the gender wheel, that sounds really historically and scientifically accurate. Or when she says historically and scientifically accurate, could she be referring to the fact that during the debate on this exact bill over in the House, Republicans introduced a simple amendment that said, hey, as long as we're being scientifically accurate, when we use the phrase gender expansive, can we make sure that only protects kids who identify as human genders, not who identify as animals? Here's how that went.
Some children consider their gender identity to include non-human characteristics, that their notion of gender includes animal characteristics, a dog or a cat.
I think we've talked before about my son. He is autistic with selective mutism, and communication's really hard for him. One of the things that makes it a lot easier is when he doesn't have to use words. And when he's happy and he greets me, sometimes he'll be wagging his imaginary tail. Or he'll growl when he's unhappy.
Yes, so scientifically accurate. So because her son wags his imaginary tail, now we have to pretend that dog can be part of gender expansive protections in our public schools. Got it. All right, let's keep going with Representative Monica Stonier.
School employees ought to have some protections if they are to do their duty to uphold those student rights.
School employees ought to have some protections, like the school employee we talked about yesterday in the Olympia School District, who over a course of many years groomed and then sexually molested a boy student and will not spend a single day in prison for it. Sounds like he's already pretty protected by the system. Sounds like we're already doing a pretty bang-up job of protecting teachers in our system, but keep trying to convince people that that's what this is all about. And then there's, of course, the biggest lie of them all, which has been woven throughout this whole debate about upending the Parental Bill of Rights. And it was even brought up during the debate about the Parental Bill of Rights when it initially came up, that, look, we don't need to expand parental rights. Parents already have, this is a nothing burger. This bill, this parental rights doesn't do anything. We already have a long list of parental rights, and we're not seeking to change any of those things. Here's Rep. Stonier again.
There's not been discussion about the removal of parental rights or the interruption of that.
Yeah, we're not discussing removing parental rights at all. That's really weird because there's a debate going on right now in the La Center School District, a tiny little school district on the Washington side near Portland, near Vancouver, Washington. And it spells out, this debate covered by KE2U, spells out exactly what kind of rights we're stripping from parents.
An investigation has wrapped up surrounding the La Center School District. Washington state education officials have determined the district discriminates against students and families when it comes to their approach to gender inclusivity and rights of queer and transgender students.
The district says it's the parent's right to know if their child wants to use a different name or pronoun. The state has now ordered the district to make changes within the next 45 days to comply with state policy. OSPI claims La Center is violating anti-discrimination policies centering around pronouns. Peter Rosencrantz, La Center's superintendent, disagrees.
We're here to educate children. That's really it. We're not here to raise children. And the challenge we face is there's language within the policy that seems to have left parents out.
Washington state's policy is to have students tell staff their preferred pronouns. The state's school superintendent wasn't available for an on-camera interview, but according to the investigation, the state determined the district discriminates against students based on gender identity by expressly prohibiting district staff from asking any student their gender pronouns. Here's where the superintendent says it doesn't work.
So you could have a situation where a child will say, I don't want my parent to know. We're in the position to keep something from a parent.
The district says parents need to be a part of the conversation.
I have to collaborate with parents, whether it's about how they're reading, whether it's about how they're doing math, or if they want to be called a different name.
Yeah, just one example of many, many. So when Rep. Monica Stonier gets before the Senate Education Committee and says this, as she did this morning.
There's not been discussion about the removal of parental rights or the interruption of that.
She's just flat out lying. And that story out of La Center is one example of that. So before the Parental Rights, Bill of Rights went into effect in the spring of last year, the rule in our school districts, as we've covered many times, as we covered in our documentary Operation Indoctrination, is if your kid goes to school and Tammy wants to be called Timmy at school, everyone keeps that secret from you as a parent. The teachers keep the secret. The teachers tell the other students to keep the secret. You'll call him Timmy here, but around their parents, call him Tammy because their parents don't know about it. The school administrators will keep the secret. Everyone keeps a secret like that from a parent, as if a parent doesn't have a right to know that their child is going to school and identifying as a different gender and being called by other adults by a different name. The Parental Bill of Rights changed that. Right now, with the Parental Bill of Rights in full effect, schools do not have the right to keep that secret from you as a parent. That secret and many other types of secrets. So when Representative Monica Stonier sits there, honest to God, in front of a committee and lies straight to them saying that we're not talking about removing parental rights, you're literally talking about moving parental rights. You're talking about picking and choosing when parents have a right to know what's going on with their kids at school because you think you know better than parents. You think you can handle these situations better than parents. You think a teenager who's been convinced by probably some woke school teacher in the Olympia School District or wherever it is that they are absolutely a girl and that it's totally fine. We'll call you by a girl's name and we'll help you transition into a girl or whatever you want. And we just won't tell your parents. They think that in that complex situation in your child's life that they're going through, that you being involved as a parent will just make things more difficult for your own kid. So it's stunning to me. The gaslighting, the lying, you are very clearly taking rights away from parents with House Bill 1296. Rights that they enjoy today because of the Parental Bill of Rights. Yet you're willing to stone-face get in front of a committee and say the exact opposite, not to mention all the other nonsense that Rep. Stonier spewed. This is about kids. This is about making sure that kids feel welcome, that they feel accepted, which is the most laughable thing. In one of the most progressive places on earth, you're telling me that you're not already fostering an environment where kids feel welcome and accepted? That sounds like a you problem, not a parent's problem. That sounds like a you problem. And then the audacity to say all of these things help us improve academic outcomes. Really? Because your academic outcomes are crap right now. Our test scores are in the toilet. What was the percentage? 78%, 72% of 8th graders don't even have basic understanding of math. So you're failing at every level in our public education system, and you believe somehow it will be made better by further cutting parents out of it. It's insane. But just so you know how this looks, the Senate immediately taking up this House bill in the Senate Education Committee means they are set on passing it. I believe with every fiber of my being, it'll pass in the state Senate and it'll go to Governor Bob Ferguson for his signature. And I do not see him giving a middle finger to the teachers union, which funds his campaign, by not signing this or by vetoing it. So that is the trajectory that we're on here. And then what's going to happen? Well, Let's Go Washington is going to run an initiative, and we're going to have to, once again, we're going to be in the exact same place we were a year and a half ago, collecting signatures to try to get your rights back as parents to know basic things about what's happening with your kids at school. How are we even having this debate? All the other things, all the other crap going on in our state, and we have to be up to our freaking elbows in trying to convince lawmakers that it's not a good idea to cut parents out of their child's education. Unreal stuff. While that's happening, more news on the education front. So maybe he's got an auto pen too. Maybe just like Biden, Chris Rakedahl, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, has an auto pen because he's sending out so many freaking threatening letters to school. I can't imagine he's signing all of them himself. So we keep getting sent from school districts threatening letters OSPI is sending them for having the audacity to take stands to protect girls' sports and girls' spaces. So I'll get to some of those individual district letters in a moment, but this one's a doozy. So for several months now, people with a brain and common sense, right, left, and center, have been hanging their hopes on the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association to adopt one of two amendments that will protect girls' sports. So the WIAA is the governing body of our school athletics program. And right now, the rule is from the state and the WIAA is you get to participate in the sport that aligns with your chosen gender. So if you just say, I'm a girl, you get to participate with the girls. And that's what our state law and the WIAA allows you to do. Now, since mid-fall of 2024, starting about 6 months ago, there were two amendments, Amendments 7 and 8, that were pushed forth within the WIAA to say, hey, is it time to change this? So both the amendments essentially accomplish the same thing. They would both say, one would say simply, you have to compete, like boys can't compete against girls, basically. The other one would create a third sort of category. There'd be boys, girls, and then there'd be this open category. So if there was someone who is gender diverse, they could choose to participate in an open category. Whatever. They're both better than things as they exist today. So we've been waiting, hoping, wishing, praying that the WIAA and its members would finally take a vote on one of these amendments. Well, you know who else has been waiting for that to happen? OSPI. And Kruse just sent a threatening letter to the head of the WIAA, basically telling them in so many words, be careful what you do. You're putting yourself in legal peril if you decide to protect girls' sports. It says in part, WIAA must follow state law, and OSPI is concerned that proposed amendments 7 and 8 to be voted on this April would violate Washington state laws. We have confidence that WIAA would not implement these amendments if they were to pass in their current form. So basically, again, it's a threat. It's a threat. It's intimidation. It's saying we think this is a violation of state law. And so we feel confident in that WIAA would never do that, even if its members vote to pass one of those amendments saying don't implement it, right? So Kruse has been all over the place, sending these threatening letters to school districts who are even taking just symbolic stances. Because a school district cannot, of its own accord, just decide boys can't compete against girls. Because again, they're governed by the WIAA rules and by state law and state policies around these things. So for instance, when the Tumwater School District, after a story that we first shared on this show about a JV girls basketball player sitting out because she didn't want to play against a biological boy. So the Tumwater School Board came back and voted just symbolically. Hey, we support these WIAA amendments as a board, and we hope that they pass. And as you'll remember, because we covered on the show, Reichdahl sent a letter to them. Like, hey, careful what you do. Again, you're putting yourself in legal risk. You don't have any sort of standing to be able to direct the WIAA what to do. And ever since we aired that letter, we have been getting nonstop letters sent to us from school district superintendents in insane areas of our state that are saying, hey, we're being threatened too. We were sent a letter that was given to the Kennewick School District, accusing them of violations when it comes to having gender-inclusive schools. Same sort of letter was sent to the Moses Lake School District. And then a similar letter accusing the Toutle Lake School District of statewide civil rights violations. Again, all because they will not fall in line, hook, line, and sinker on the radical gender ideology, even if their argument is, hey, we're going to lose federal funding. Like, let's put our opinion on whether boys should play against girls aside and just look at this rationally. We're going to lose federal funding if we don't stop letting boys compete against girls. Our state does not care. If they lose federal funding, they'll raise your taxes. Seattle and King County will vote for us, and they'll find a way to fill in the gaps wherever they need to fill in the gaps. And Kruse has absolutely planted his flag on this. He will go down with the ship. He absolutely wants boys to play against girls. And as a man, I think that's pretty disgusting. I talked about this on the show the other day. Some people who have really started to gross me out are men who go after women for wanting to protect girls' spaces. It's a really weird thing. Like, what dog do you have in the fight, Kruse? Super strange. So all this brings me to the news that's unfolding as we speak nationally. So President Donald Trump is going to make good on his campaign promise to close the U.S. Department of Education. If he's not signing it right now, he's going to be signing it at any minute. 2 weeks ago, he went in there and there was a bunch of staff cuts, and I think that was sort of a precursor to what's to come. And the more I've learned about this issue, because when Trump first started talking about defunding the U.S. Department of Education, I thought, well, that's interesting. I don't know much about that. What are the pros and the cons? And after speaking to some experts, I don't understand why states like ours and Democrats are so up in arms about this. Because all this would do is give power back to the states. And if you're a state like Washington, you hate Donald Trump and his Department of Education anyway. And given the way the Democrats are acting, we'll probably have a Republican president for at least the next 12 to 16 years. So isn't this a good thing for you? If they close the U.S. Department of Education and give all of the powers and influence and grants back to the states to control, wouldn't Washington state want that? So Donald Trump is going to do this. And I will say, I still have one key reservation about the timing of it. I wish Donald Trump would wait to do this until his final year in office. Why? Because the second he actually closes the U.S. Department of Education, his threats to states like ours and other blue states that are letting boys compete against girls, those threats have no teeth anymore. Remember, he has said, and via executive order, that essentially I'll strip federal funding from school districts and states that are not protecting girls' spaces and that are pushing this radical gender ideology. So my fear is that if he really quickly closes the U.S. Department of Education, then our state really doesn't have that financial motivation and incentive to stop letting boys compete against girls. And I'm very concerned about that. And invariably, when we talk about this issue, I'll have people say, this never happens, like you're making too big of an issue out of it. I don't care if it only happens once. This, to me, is an issue of common sense, right? If we can't have common sense policies on this issue, we're doomed on so many other things. If we continue to have people in power who have convinced themselves that it is perfectly acceptable and appropriate for a biological boy who's bigger, faster, stronger to play against biological girls, then how can those leaders be trusted to govern competently? This is like the barometer of sanity, right? And this happens much more frequently than the mainstream news would lead you to believe. In fact, there was just a video posted yesterday out of Portland in the Interscholastic League meet in Oregon. A male runner absolutely eviscerated the girls in the 400-meter dash.
Let's go, Kruse! Come on, Kelly!
Yeah, wasn't even close. By 7 seconds in once around the lap. Beat him by 7 seconds. Why? Because he's a boy. Because he's a boy. So this is happening in crazy states like Washington, Oregon, California, Maine, you name it. Donald Trump has a threat to be able to maybe put an end to it if he makes good on his threat. But if he defunds the U.S. Department of Education right now, I'm worried that that threat will no longer exist and that Washington state will be right back to where we started. And that worries me quite a bit. All right, we have a ton more to get to on the show today, including my idea for a new reality show. I think you're going to like it. Nicole's going to like it. The Mean Moms of Newcastle. So you got the Real Housewives of Orange County.
Yeah.
Real Housewives of the Potomac.
Oh, they're all over the place
all
now.
over the Dubai. The Mean Moms of Newcastle, Washington. That's a pilot. Give me a pilot. Our segment today will be the pilot, so we'll have that coming up. First, our friend Zach Abraham, don't forget, today at 3:30 p.m., you still have time to sign up. He's having his first 100 days live webinar where he's going to go over the first 100 days of the Trump administration, talk about some of the economic activity, certainly what's going on with the markets. Zach and I talked about what you can expect if you attend today's webinar.
We try to keep it 45 minutes, and it's just really a primer on who we are, what makes us different, how we're active managers, how that's different than the vast majority of your assets get managed, and then walking through. We kind of had a rough start to the year on Wall Street. We're actually having a really nice year, solidly up on the year, and explaining to people why, how. It's not magic, it's not craziness, but just explaining to them what's going on in the world and how we're at an extraordinarily historic place that we've never been in terms of the world, the U.S. making up a bigger percentage of world market, stock market value than any nation ever has, and how offsides it is, and how people need to be diversified. And I think that there's a lot of pain that can be avoided, but more importantly, just great opportunities. We're just going to walk through. And so even if people didn't become investors with us per se, I think it could still teach them a lot if they were doing it on their own. So if nothing else, maybe they'll leave more informed, more educated.
Yeah, knowledge is power. And look, whenever the stock market goes down, especially if you're close to retirement, that's going to freak you out. I think that's understandable no matter who the president is or how short-lived it might be. So Zach's first 100 Days live webinar coming up today at 3:30 p.m. You can sign up for it right now, knowyourriskradio.com. That's knowyourriskradio.com. And this comment came in, and I just want to clarify. So Sean Bell said on YouTube, compliance in terms of Donald Trump and defunding will be moved to another federal office. Brandi, Trump has already said that. I understand that you could go after them for compliance with Title IX, right? Because the Trump administration's interpretation of Title IX is much different than the Biden administration's interpretation of Title IX. But the thing is, you could sue them, you could take that to the courts to try to enforce compliance, but I still think that threat of federal funding as it comes to education will not be the same. So I don't know what's a more effective means of getting them to comply. Is it forced compliance through the courts, or is it taking a bunch of money away? So I think the ability to take the money away that he's threatened to take away would go away if the U.S. Department of Education closes down. But you could go about it through the courts as well. So thank you for the comment. All right. I want to talk really quickly about a kind of offbeat story that is on its face is a little insider baseball, but I think that there's a much bigger picture thing happening here. So you've probably seen this in the Seattle Times. The headline, top Governor Ferguson aide resigns amid workplace complaints. So the guy's name is Mike Webb. He's the governor's, because he's resigned, chief strategy officer, and has been a long-time political advisor to the governor. He ran his 2012 campaign for attorney general, and he's been like his right-hand man ever since. So he had these accusations that particularly around women, he created a hostile work environment for women. And so we're a month and a half, 2 months into the Ferguson administration. He had one of his top advisors, a woman, resign. Then all this came out about Mike Webb saying he's creating a hostile work environment for women. So he came out, he resigned. He said, I deeply regret that the allegations of hostile work environment have created an unhelpful distraction that impacts the team's ability to do their work, as well as my ability to be effective. Is this Ferguson's statement? Effective in the near term, to be blunt, given the stakes of the work ahead, I cannot stomach that. Can you check, was that a Ferguson statement or a Mike Webb statement? That was Mike Webb. Okay. So
that was in his letter.
Yeah, he decides to leave and resign. So you could look at all of this and say, well, gosh, Ferguson knows how to pick him. Like in his first 2 months in office, he's already had 2 key advisors resign and this whole thing about internal turmoil. So some background here that I think will be interesting to you. Back during the gubernatorial campaign, I and others in the media were floated this story about Mike Webb, basically told these accusations and some other things that Mike Webb was just a bad guy, right? And it was being floated to us by people who didn't want Bob Ferguson to win. And we didn't want Bob Ferguson to win, so we were very interested in the story as well. And the angle of it was sort of like the company he keeps, right? Like, he doesn't know how to pick them. And he's known for a long time, this is how it was pitched to us, that this Mike Webb guy was bad news, but he stood by his side anyway, and he came with him through all this political rise. So that was a story that was pitched to us, and we looked into it quite a bit. I had phone calls with individuals who made accusations against Mike Webb about this hostility allegedly toward women. Now, there's several reasons behind the scenes why we never went with the story at the time. One of the reasons was, among several others, that I felt it was really important to get people on the record with their name, not anonymous sources, given the nature of some of the accusations and the fact that we knew the motivations of the people who brought it to us, and that it was in the middle of a campaign. And even though I don't like Bob Ferguson and I didn't want him to win, I still have an obligation to make sure that I'm thinking critically about the information that's presented to me, and that given the nature of it, anonymous sources just weren't going to do it for me. But there were some other things at play as well. So we didn't go after the story at the time. But again, it was being actively floated out there for, frankly, political reasons. Now, that doesn't mean it's not true. I do believe that these accusations against Mike Webb are credible based on the conversations that I have. I definitely do. So a story can be two things. It can be true and it can be politically motivated. So at the time it was being floated to us, I believe it was politically motivated, but I also believed it was true. So now fast forward, why is it coming? Ask yourself, this is very important. Why is it coming up now? Why is it being floated again? It was floated about 1.5 years ago. Now it's being floated again. So I believe everything that's being said is true, but I also believe that there are some motives that are important to understand. What's happening with Bob Ferguson and the Democrats right now? Because there were a couple Democratic lawmakers who were quoted in the Seattle Times story, basically about Mike Webb and the accusations against him, which they know is going to make Bob Ferguson look bad, right? And one of them is the state lawmaker that's behind rent control. So you have this very progressive state lawmaker who's willing to go on the record in a quote in a Seattle Times article that she knows will make Bob Ferguson look bad. So why is this happening? What is the motivation for floating this all right now? Make no mistake, when I first read it, the motivation is clear. The far left in the Progressive Caucus is trying to put Bob Ferguson on notice. They are trying to essentially threaten him and guilt him and, hey, we're not loyal to you. You better start doing what we want you to do. And you better stop talking so much about how we overspent. And that's why we're in a budget deficit. Because Bob Ferguson, they're pushing all these crazy agenda. He's been a little bit leery about some of the things that the progressives have been pushing. And the progressives are now worried that they don't actually have a friend in the governor's office. So this, in a way, is blackmail via the media, where his own party is saying, we will come after you publicly. We will tear you down unless you fall in line. That's what this is. Make no mistake. All behind the scenes, it's incredibly strategic. It's fascinating, frankly, that just 2 months in, he's drawn this much ire from members of his own party in the state legislature. So watch this very carefully. See how Bob Ferguson reacts. Will he fall in line with the progressives? Will he sign some of their bills like pay for striking workers, rent control, et cetera, et cetera? Will he start to agree with them that, yeah, maybe we do need some new taxes to fill this budget deficit. Maybe we don't need to cut so much spending. See if Bob Ferguson's attitude in relationship with the Progressive Caucus improves, or if he says, I don't care if they're going to blackmail me with this and try to make me look bad, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. But very interesting. I thought you'd like to know the background of that. All right, here we have it. Introducing you to my pitch for a new show, The Mean Moms of Newcastle, Washington. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Woo. All right, so this is just crazy stuff. This is absolutely nuts. Like, look, let me first say this. I like when citizens get engaged in the political process. I like when citizens show up at council meetings and testify. I encourage you guys to do it all the time. But there is a big, big difference between trying in earnest and with good intentions to influence public policy and just being an asshat on the internet and just being an absolutely bad person. And I have to preface all of this with this clip I saw from CNN. Because don't we say this on the show all the time? What is going on with white women? What is going on with white women? Particularly white liberal women between like 45 and 55 have lost their damn minds. And the polling backs that up.
White women with at least a college degree, the only group of white voters that really kind of is on the left politically, aligned with progressive causes, democratic politics. Give you an example here. It's that DEI question, right here, that we asked about in our poll. We had two big statements we read to voters. Basically, do you want to continue DEI programs or do you think they should be ended? And again, look at this divide here. White men, no degree, end it. White men with a degree, end it, they say. White women, no degree, end it, they say, by double digits. And then white women with a college degree, completely different by a nearly 40-point margin.
Yeah, so this is going to prove the whole point of the background of what I'm talking about. Mean Moms of Newcastle, Washington. So let's go back to June of 2024. There was this debate in the city of Newcastle, which is in rural King County, where the they decided they weren't going to raise the pride flag over City Hall. And June is Pride Month, right? So that's why June of 2024. And Newcastle Mayor Robert Clark was met with a lot of vitriol. And he finally had enough, and he just said his piece about why he wasn't interested in essentially elevating the pride flag over the American flag.
So if we start raising flags, we got to raise everybody. How we want a Hamas flag flying over, the city of Newcastle, or MAGA flag? How about a Trump flag or an Antifa flag? We're not going there, folks. Not while I'm the mayor. I'm sorry. So this is already an inclusive city with an inclusive flag that flies 24/7 over our city. We include everybody. We're not going to exclude somebody, and we're not going to say, well, this group is better than that group, so they get a flag or they get a day. Everybody is equally represented by the American flag every single day.
Amen. So we had him on the show, and he actually kind of surprised me because he's very, I wouldn't say shy, but he's very soft-spoken. He's a very humble guy. And you could tell in talking to him, he didn't want to be put in that situation. He's really not the kind of guy that's always at the council meetings trying to make some sort of political point. He just had enough. And since that time, so almost a year, the lefty loony moms in Newcastle have been absolutely down his throat, saying all sorts of crazy things about him, some of which we'll get to in a moment. But basically, he's the worst guy on the planet. Well, he's back in the news, along with these lefty moms, for a comment that has now gone national overnight. I mean, instantaneously, for reasons that you will realize. So one of these community member moms who's always saying horrible things about the mayor because he's not inclusive and he hates gay people and he's a white nationalist or whatever it is. Her name is Jen McAleer. She speaks at these meetings all the time. So now she's mad at him because he's prioritizing the prisoner of war flag ahead of the LGBTQ plus flag.
I find it really interesting that your perspective on flags has evolved so much, as well as on proclamations over the last year. Happy to hear that, and I'm hoping that we can look forward to your support of the pride flag and proclamation this year. Since you have a newfound appreciation for other flags other than just the U.S. flag. Speaking specifically about veterans, POWs, and MIAs, I want to say for the record, I'm very much in support of them and have absolutely no problem with the POW MIA flag. Flying it for 100 days a year is a political stunt. You talk a lot about special interest. In this room specifically, you've mentioned it repeatedly. My research shows that there's been 82,000 Americans who were registered as POWs or MIAs, which is atrocious and horrible, and it should never happen to any American. But there's 20 million minimum LGBTQ members. So when we're talking about special interest, let's just have some intellectual integrity. I've talked before about the hypocrisy of some of the people up on that dais, and I think that your approach to trying to trick people out of having to fly the pride flag in June by making sure that the POW MIA flag was flown is really disgusting, and again, it's not impartial in any way, and I think that you should be ashamed. I definitely am. Thank you.
It's not common that I respond to public comment, but I will not sit here and have somebody tell me that veterans are a political stunt. How dare you? This country was founded because veterans lost their lives. Hundreds of thousands of people died for this country so that you could fly your pride flag. And man, I am pissed. I'm sorry. This is out of line, and perhaps my council members will censure me for this. But do not ever disparage veterans in my presence, right? Those 82,000 people who never came home will never have a chance to have a family or grow up while you can fly your pride flag. They sacrificed their lives all over the world for America and for freedom around the world. I tolerate your comments, which are always on the attack, and all in your libelous comments on Facebook. I tolerate it because you probably can't help yourself, but don't ever disparage veterans in front of me. Don't ever disparage veterans in front of me, and we're done. Okay, next up on public comment.
Ooh, Robert Clark. Robert Clark. Oh, that was brilliant. His response sort of overshadows how absolutely insane that woman is. To stand up there and say it's disgusting and horrible to prioritize a prisoner of war flag above the LGBTQ flag, because she's mad that last year they wouldn't fly the LGBTQ flag, but they get to fly the prisoner of war flag, and saying because there's more LGBTQ people than there are or were prisoners of war, that it's somehow more important. And his response is just brilliant. But that's the mindset of these people. So again, that woman's name is Jen McAleer, and I think she is gay, right? And so maybe that's why she's so passionate about these issues. She speaks during these meetings. But Jen and her posse of mean moms, let's introduce you to them, shall we? Because they have made a point of being very vocal publicly, putting themselves out in the public sphere, acting completely inappropriately, spreading libelous statements about anyone who they disagree with, all while hiding behind the rules that they have set of a community Facebook page. Let me introduce this Facebook page to you because I think it's very rich, right? It's the Newcastle WIAA neighborhood page. And it's run by a woman named Tiffany and a woman named Shirley, who are moderators of this page. And the rules are very clear, right? Totally appropriate. Be kind and courteous. No hate speech or bullying. That's pretty common for a community page, right? Well, let's see what kinds of things that these women, the moderators, again, Tiffany, Shirley, Allison Sweeney, who owns Frosty Burl Ice Cream Shop, also the head of the Chamber of Commerce, Beth McDaniel, an attorney, the Chamber of Commerce secretary, and Jen McAleer. Let's see what kind of things they post on this community Facebook page where they're supposed to be kind and courteous, where they're not supposed to have any hate speech or bullying. Let's see what these 45 to 55-year-old white progressive women are up to, shall we? Jen McAleer, who you just heard from there. There is so much open racism and bigotry on the council, the mayor specifically, as well as others. They don't even bother trying to hide it. White Christian nationalism is alive and well in Newcastle. See how blatant they are, clearly emboldened to speak their horrific, ignorant, ugly truths, and they always have supporters in the audience. So if you are not a white nationalist, it's important for you to show up. Literally accusing this guy of being a white nationalist because he is mad that they're disparaging veterans. Or he has the audacity to say that the American flag is the most inclusive flag out there. Gosh, I don't know about you, but that sounds an awful lot like hate speech and bullying. And it doesn't seem like she's very kind and courteous on this page, does it? We have reached out, by the way, to Jen via a very dubious-looking nonprofit that she runs, to ask her, hey, can you provide us with evidence that the mayor or anyone on the council is a white nationalist? Can you provide us with any sort of evidence that the mayor or someone else on the council is racist? Maybe some comments that they've made in that regard? Because we'd really like to know if you can back up some of these statements that you're making. All right, let's move on to our next mean mom of Newcastle. Her name is Tiffany Ann. Well, Tiffany Ann, who's an admin on this page where you're supposed to be kind and courteous and have no hate speech and bullying, well, she has an awful lot of unkind, uncourteous, bullying hate speech. Like about our friend Jonathan Cho. What's wrong with Jonathan Cho? She says people need to see how horrible he is. It's sickening how buddy-buddy our mayor is with people who amplify the voices of domestic terrorists. Interesting. Let's see. Tiffany calling other people on the page hateful and divisive. I mean, I'm so disappointed in Mayor Clark. Tiffany responding, we forget he's a minion to the watchdog propaganda group. She's just absolutely crazy. And you'll see Tiffany in this video from June during the Pride Month debate where she is physically blocking a street preacher from being able to move about freely in a public space.
Why aren't you letting him walk in public property, ma'am? Ma'am, you're blocking him. You're blocking him. You touch me, you're going to be in big trouble.
Piss off.
Do it, bro.
Piss off. Piss
This guy
off.
threatened
Go.
me,
Piss
and you're not
off.
in.
Piss off. F off. Get out of here. F off.
Look
Go
at this
away.
guy.
F off. Piss off. Get out of here. Go away.
You speak another
F off. Piss off. Go out of here.
Hey, look at this guy. That's your boy.
Those Newcastle lefties, aren't they just welcoming? They just want everyone to love everyone. You know, that's what they're about. They're about inclusion. Don't you get that sense from them? They're about inclusion. That's all they really want. But I gotta say, there's something, and she's back there blocking the street preacher. You're not allowed to move about freely into public space. This is one of these crazy Newcastle moms that just cannot tolerate that their mayor loves America and loves our veterans. And now they get to be all over the internet with their absolute, utter nonsense. But yeah, the Newcastle WA neighborhood page, where the only people who can engage in hate speech, bullying, and unkind and uncourteous remarks are the Newcastle moms who run the page and their buddies. Insane. Something is seriously wrong with liberal white women these days. I don't know what's going on. All right. I've encouraged you guys to take the First Mark Challenge. Firstmarkinsurance.com. Firstmarkinsurance.com. The very best part is they work for you and they can help you save hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a year on your insurance needs. That was the case for Eric, an undivided viewer who says they saved him 30% on his auto policy, 70% on his homeowner's policy. He says, I now tell anyone I know who's dealing with changes to their insurance to give First Mark a call. I did, and I'm truly richer for it. We just hear endless great stories from undivided listeners and viewers who finally gave in, took the First Mark Challenge, and they now have thousands of extra dollars a year. What are you going to do with that extra money? Man, so many options. So you can check them out, firstmarkinsurance.com. Take the First Mark Challenge today, firstmarkinsurance.com. Okay, let's get to some national news. I don't know if it's willful ignorance or if it's just lying, but you see this so often where leaders in areas of our country that are clearly struggling want to act like nothing's wrong. I mean, I think of Chicago often when I think of this. You know, they're so focused on, Trump administration and gun violence while they have people in record numbers shooting each other on the streets of their city. And they're just like either oblivious to it or whatever it is. So we get that all the time in Washington State and in Seattle and all the nonsense that's going on and the street crime, the drug abuse, and they want to act like there's no problems at all. Well, Governor Tina Kotek down in Oregon seems to be the same. She tweeted out this article, the headline from Bloomberg, Progressive Portland plots a comeback. She says, the rest of the country is taking notice of what we're already feeling. Portland is back on track, making progress on being safe, livable, and vibrant. Let's keep going. Interesting. Portland is back on track. Is it now? Gosh, I haven't been to Portland in a while, but I see a lot of stuff on the internet about Portland, and I am just not sure that it's back on track. Our friend Tara Fowle, who's an independent journalist down in Portland who we've had on the show before, she responded to Governor Kotek with a few pictures that she took. When the harm reduction van just rolled through Portland, but people's feet are rotting off, and it has a picture of literal harm reduction kits. You guys, harm reduction kits and Narcan and stuff to help you use drugs sat next to a person under a pile of trash whose feet are literally rotting off. Can you get a picture that more properly encapsulates the progressive worldview and the quote-unquote harm reduction than that one? Holy moly. Tara Fowle also tweeted this out in response to Governor Kotek. Tourists with their voodoo donut bags walking around East Coast transplants, digging through garbage with poop-stained asses next to filthy sharps containers is very vibrant, Portland. I mean, that's just the truth. Literally, tourists trying to go through what should be tourist-friendly parts of Portland. And there's some guy with his butt out, stained with crap, digging through trash with filthy sharps containers nearby. And the governor of Oregon wants to say Portland is back on track. Back on track to what? It's just absolutely insane. It's got to be gaslighting, where they're just like, if I say it, people will think it's true. And maybe they will. If I say it, people will think it's true, unless they actually care to go to downtown Portland for themselves. Unbelievable. I asked you guys just for fun in our daily subscriber show poll on Patreon, Locals, and X, which West Coast city would be last on your list to visit with your family? Seattle, Portland, or San Francisco? Nicole, what do you say? Seattle, Portland, or San Francisco? Which would be the last one? Let's say you took your niece.
Yep.
You know, how old is she now? She's like, your older niece.
The older ones are 16 and 20.
Yeah.
17 and 20
say
now.
they want to go on a girls' trip.
Yeah.
And you had these three choices. Which one would you cross off first?
Oh, last would be Portland for sure. There's not a lot to look at other than things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in Seattle, I know where to go.
Sure. Okay.
And then in San Francisco, also, you kind of, the touristy places that they keep pretty tidy, and you just don't go off those, off the strip like they would call them.
Well, and you have nicer weather too, right?
Nicer weather as well. Yes.
But I don't know. San Francisco is sort of the OG degenerate city. Like they got the worst.
But it's in that fastest, area.
The earliest.
For the most part, when I was there last, you could still go to the touristy places, the touristy shopping places, and mostly avoid it. But yeah, you don't go down to the, what do they call it? The
Tenderloin.
Tenderloin, yeah.
You know what's interesting is our subscribers disagree with you.
Oh,
the place that would be last on their list is San Francisco.
I think that's because of the coverage that it gets. So you don't see the nice anymore. You don't see the touristy places anymore. But you could still walk across the Golden Gate Bridge and probably not get, attacked by somebody.
Some of the comments are damn good today.
They're
Dan says, it's like asking what type of feces you want to smell. None of it. None of it.
It's true. They're all pretty low on my list.
Have you seen the video there's 2 videos involving poo and Teslas? In one of them, a guy he picks up his dog's poo and then he rubs it across the side of a Tesla. Oh. You haven't seen the other one?
No.
A dude who looks just like you'd think he'd look. Digging in his own...
Stop.
Like digging deep, and then wiping it on the handles of a Tesla. You haven't seen that, Nicole?
Oh, I purposely would keep scrolling.
Repeatedly,
I can't handle it.
Repeatedly and deeply.
My gag reflex can't handle it.
Imagine being so unhinged. You put your hand up, your own bum, cover it with poo so you can wipe it on a stranger's car.
So I'm confused because if that's wrong, if you're that mentally ill, then you're not really concerned about Elon and Trump. So is Soros paying these people? Is Soros going to go rub some poo?
No,
who's paying these people?
That is someone who's so indoctrinated. And the other thing that gets me, and I'll get back to subscriber comments.
That is not a civil person. I mean,
well,
I know
not.
that
None of the
these people are civil. I get it, but I think that's another level because somebody has to recruit a person that's that mentally ill.
No, I don't think so. I think this person's just that unhinged.
That is disturbing.
And they strike you as the kind of person who doesn't wipe well.
Or who
I'm doesn't
sure
for sure wipe well. Yeah. Anyway, let me see. On the least visitable West Coast city, Jim says, wow, I have to pick. I used to live down by Portland and it's shameful what it's turned into. I dread going to any of them and I don't even have a Tesla. Yeah. Let's see. Sharon, we recently were in Portland for a conference. It was embarrassing to see the reactions of the international attendees when they got a view of the craziness that was going on the streets outside. It certainly didn't inspire them to see any more of the city. They just dashed from the hotel to the conference and will probably request a better venue next time. Yeah. Why? Haven't been to Portland in years, but I will definitely stay out of San Francisco. Scott says, I was in San Francisco a few years ago. Never again. Also, I will only drive through Portland. Just drive through it. Let's see. Brenda says, I chose Seattle because I've been there many, many times, though not recently. Last time was in February of 2020, but actually I don't want to visit any of them.
No.
Yeah. It's really a sad state of things because West Coast is just a beautiful place. I mean, there's so many elements and so different when you look at what Portland has to offer in Seattle in their prime and San Francisco, and these would all be wonderful and were at one time wonderful, beautiful gems of cities to attract tourists. And the fact that we have allowed left coast progressivism to derail them and destroy them is so insane. But good for Tara for calling out the governor. Like,
I love it.
Is it this guy with his butt out near Tira's digging through trash? Or is it, I mean, honestly, the harm reduction kits next to the rotting feet
laid out in a display. It looks like here, do you want to buy any of this? Or it's displayed.
It's should be the picture that crumbles progressivism. Like, you should never look at that picture and be able to vote for a Democrat ever again in the West Coast. All right, let's go somewhere where things are much, much different, shall we? Take a little respite from the West Coast crazy. It is our weekly segment, Florida Report.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Miranda, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, well, we're not going to necessarily cover it, but there's a fire burning through the Keys right now. Hope everybody's okay.
Yes, most of the area that's on fire is Gator territory, so say a prayer for the Gators.
They deserve it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I don't want any wildlife to die. All right, let's talk about immigration. So obviously Ron DeSantis came out. They passed this whole slew of ways that they were going to cooperate with federal immigration efforts. And there was, I think, a question about, okay, how is Florida's immigrant community going to respond to that? Because especially in South Florida where you are, there are a ton of Cuban immigrants and otherwise. Turns out they don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, compared to Trump's first term, it is a lot quieter in the streets down here this time around. I mean, South Florida does have some of the largest communities of Cubans, Venezuelans, and other Latin Americans that live here. And, for example, based out of Hialeah, which is a city kind of north of Miami, 95% Hispanic population, only 3 people showed up to the city council meeting to speak against their police department working in connection with the federal government on immigration efforts.
Yeah. And that's so funny because here, we're mostly white. We have some immigrant communities, but then you'll have like 9,000 white people show up to city council to rail against what the Trump administration is doing. So it's interesting. But I honestly, I think that goes back to a lot of those people had to go through a lot to get here legally. They work very hard. And so if anyone should have a problem with people coming in illegally, it's them.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of, we've talked about this before, a lot of the community, like the Cuban community here, has a lot of pride in the fact that they came here through legal avenues. And they'll be the first ones to say it out loud, like that they followed the rules. And although Cubans did get a little bit of a shorter route here because of certain Cold War era laws that are in place down here, they still are very proud of the fact that they did it the right way. So I think encouraging, coming from their mouths, it probably has a little bit more weight than coming from, people who are just born here and have an opinion on the matter. So it is nice to see them speak up and to see how fewer people show up in opposition this time around.
Yeah, and that does speak louder to me than like angry. I mean, as we talked about on the show today, I don't know what's up with angry 45 to 55-year-old white women with their just seeping white guilt, self-righteousness, but that's like all you get in Washington state. Okay, a bill, this is an interesting one. So a bill, I think it's going through the state Senate in Florida, essentially seeks to provide career-ready training specifically for young people with autism. What's the goal?
Yeah, so the goal here is to train teachers to give people that are diagnosed and on the spectrum additional credit, and they call them badges, where they can go through specific training specifically to get jobs. So this would go through workforce or workplace safety is the main concern. Communication, all these different levels of education towards joining the workforce. And it would basically allow them to earn badges that could get reported to the Florida Department of Education that will allow them a little bit of a better opportunity leaving school to get jobs and have employers have a little bit of extra confidence in their ability to work for them.
Yeah, and I think the idea and what I was reading about it too is that they want people with autism not to be seen as like DEI hires, that they can be very capable and able in the workforce and, showing, hey, here's what they went through in high school to prepare themselves for a workforce without you having to sort of give them a diversity hire, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of will eliminate that middle ground question of like, am I hiring them because I feel like I have to, or am I hiring them because they are just as capable as anybody else that applies for the job? And I love that. I think giving people the prerequisites that eliminate doubt is a great gift to give anybody.
Well, and honestly, let's just be frank. I think one of the biggest challenges for autistic people is like social interactions. Most of them are highly intelligent, and they can get, in specific areas. I mean, Elon Musk is autistic, right? Has he, I don't know if he's admitted that, but, I think that's the ongoing joke. He's like one of the smartest, most creative people on earth. And so there are some fields that people who are on the spectrum are actually incredibly well suited for. And so I think when you start to look at it as actually picking out the strengths and things they could be better at than people who aren't on the spectrum and prepare them for those careers, I mean, that just benefits everyone. So is that mean to say that Elon has autism if he hasn't been, has he been diagnosed? Can I do that? You know what?
He's been diagnosed by the Court of Public Opinion on medical.
No, he's actually said publicly that he has Asperger's.
Okay. Oh yeah, Asperger's is high functioning autism. I did a story in college, one of my first college journalism endeavors, on this bowling phenom who had Asperger's, and this just was one of those things, they're tunneling all their focus into something. And she was exceptionally good at bowling. And it was just an interesting sort of learning experience for what Asperger's means and what autism means and sort of how their brains just work differently. So I like this bill. I think it's great. And yeah, prepare people for the workforce to be productive citizens and don't, act like they can't do a job because they have autism and they need special privileges and stuff. So, all right, Miranda, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Have a good weekend.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
I don't know, after that wildfire, the gators might be meowing, help me. I don't want them to burn, but they can just go in the water.
I hope so. That's what I would like to believe, is that they just go for a little swim away from the fire.
Swim, because they can just put their little nostrils above.
I know, they do need to breathe, so they just got to find the good spot.
Go deep enough. Live another day to bite another person. All right, we'll get to our show comments next in our closing sanity check. First, great month of the year, as is May, to list your home for sale. And right now, it is a seller's market. So if you're thinking about selling your home, reach out to our friend Wes Jones at sellwithwes.com. The issue right now is low inventory, not low buyer demand. So man, if a home that's listed at the right price, that's properly prepared for sale, hits the market, that thing goes so fast. And Wes Jones can help you with both of those. Make sure your home is properly prepared for listing, priced correctly. Wes has been doing this for a long time, and he's very good at gauging the market and understanding what needs to be done. There are some periods of time we've been through where look, you could put your home on the market in any condition and people would just scoop that right up. I think you need to put a little more effort in right now, but you can still get top dollar for your home. So sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. He says he's really optimistic that 2025 is going to be a strong year for real estate over 2024. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, Debbie930. Is this from yesterday's show? Did we just miss it? $10 super chat. Thanks, Brandi, for the honest reporting. You're welcome. Maynard Jeffers, for the sake of your children and grandchildren, get them out of Washington public schools. And I actually want to correct something I said on the show yesterday, because this sort of reminds me of this. Not a factual error, but maybe an error in judgment. I did the opening segment of our show about that perv teacher in the Olympia School District who is avoiding prison time. And I said, there's no one in the Olympia School District who's watching out for your kids. I want to take that back because, there are some good teachers who are in the Olympia School District who are trying, but they can only do so much. And so I don't want to act like every single employee of the Olympia School District has lost their damn minds. There are some good teachers
shut out and fired if they speak out.
Yeah.
So it's
we talked to one who was fired, or he quit rather. Yeah. Greg, shut it down now. All the Department of Education is a way for states to launder money. Those federal dollars are not monitored. Linda, also teaching kids that lying and keeping secrets is okay and that morals don't matter. Unbelievable. Again, you're literally telling, as teachers, these students, we're going to keep the secret from your parents. Don't worry. It's an insane thing to think that a parent doesn't deserve to know that their kid is being called by a different name at school. Weird. Rachel, won't Democrats do the exact same thing they did with the last initiatives? So, yes, they'll spend a lot of money lying about an initiative to restore parental rights, but this could be a little bit different because the way that they were able to manipulate the last initiatives is because of the fiscal situation. So they had passed a law that said if it's repealing a tax, for instance, you have to put a little addendum that says, all these bad things will happen if you repeal this tax. So voters see that and they're like, well, I don't want any of those bad things to happen, so I'm not going to repeal this tax. But the Parental Bill of Rights doesn't have a tax associated with it. So they're not going to have, unless they find some other creative way to manipulate voters, they're not going to have that little wrinkle. So hopefully, if this goes to the ballot, it would be easier to find success. Knuckles says, Bobby boy, join the side with common sense. You talk about Bob Ferguson? I still don't trust Bob Ferguson at all. However, he's angering the right people, so maybe that's a good thing. Matthew, this is what happens when the Chardonnay and Pinot girls drinking gets out of control in Newcastle. That's what happens when you're a bored housewife, I think. Honestly, you're like looking for ways to just stir things up.
Or not bored, just exhausted. I'm just saying.
Exhausted. No, I'm talking about the ones who were at the Newcastle meeting talking about POWs.
Yes. I thought you meant drinking wine.
No, drinking wine is fine. It's fine. There's something going on with white progressive women 45 to 55.
I don't know if it's too much time on TikTok, too much time on Facebook. It's echo chambers that people get in, and they just think everyone thinks like them. Everyone should think like them. They can change mentality if they just get aggressive enough, and it's out of control.
It really is. Let's see. Java Junkie. I'm so nervous. I used to live in Newcastle, moved to Maple Valley to be in the little bubble of reasonable people. Yeah, I think there's still reasonable people in Newcastle. Surely the mayor is one of them. It's just insane to watch the level of vitriol from this small group of women against him. And it's been nonstop since the pride flag thing. Yep. And look, he's an elected official. That's part and parcel for the job. Like, you have to deal with that kind of stuff. But I love how his retort wasn't about him. Like, you can go unhinged at me if you want, but you will not speak that way about veterans in front of me.
This is a common occurrence at the meetings. And they typically get up. One of these ladies gets up, speaks nonsense, and he just lets it go. He said, welcomes them up there, says, thanks for your comment. They sit down, and there's some council members that tend to side with some of these crazies and some that are not and kind of on his side, but no one speaks up for him. So he just kind of lets everything go. And this time he was like, enough.
Right. That's just insane. I do love it. It's a good one. And it's all over the place right now.
Such a good guy. Be nice.
He is such a sweet man. He really is. And I met his wife and him in person over the summer after our interview, and they're just the nicest people.
They
so
sent
it's like
us
you guys
a Christmas
are unhinged.
card after our interview last year.
Crazy.
So thoughtful.
Sunny Days PNW says, Robert Clark, he became a hero of mine when he stood up for Americans and denied the pride flag at Newcastle City Hall. Stay Back says, I'm no longer a freeloader, now an Undivided Ultra subscriber. Oh, thank you for subscribing to Undivided. Love what you do. Hey, the time as a freeloader came to an end. We appreciate it. Sergeant Pickles, $4.99 super chat. Good afternoon, all. Taking a trip to Friday Harbor today, hopefully without the 6-hour delay. We'll report back later. Yeah, I'm curious if the ferry system has gotten any better. But enjoy Friday Harbor. It really is beautiful.
Yeah.
Lizzie, for D to update his sweater choice into the 21st century. What?
Ouch.
Oh.
I know.
With a $5 super chat. Is it because the picture of Daryl at the end of the show?
Is in his little
Daryl's very stylish.
Sweater or Huxtable.
Yeah, Daryl's very stylish. And his wife literally works in fashion. So she's
that's why he's
incredibly
stylish. And he admits that.
He does admit that? I always feel like Daryl's always been stylish, but you're probably right. It's probably upped his game with his wife, who's just like always very put together. But so he's going to be very offended, Lizzie, but I'll give him that $5 anyway.
He was in the comments responding to that.
So he was.
He's aware.
Okay. Gotcha. Captain Cranky Pants, $20 super chat. I really think the only way to stop this insanity is to go back to voter ID and in-person voting. Until we do that, this will continue. Barron, DOE closes. WA State will fail further. Parents will revolt. Lefties don't have kids, though. School districts shouldn't comply. Make them enforce this. State governor will lose. Title IX trumps all. That's some wishful thinking. Papa Woody, the only thing it does is allow us to see how many people are armchair psychiatrists and damages children. Is that about the Parental Bill of Rights?
I believe
maybe?
So. Mm-hmm.
Adorable Deplorable, $5 super chat. Small down payment for Brandi to move to Olympia and run for OSD school board. Yeah, like that's what I want to do.
If Brandi's going to run for anything, she's going to have more impact than one city.
School board's very important, and they do need some sane people on the OSD school board. But I don't live there, and I don't have children. So I think I'll stay right here and just talk smack about them.
Fair.
How does that sound?
I like that idea.
I'm sure at their next school board meeting will be a subject of conversation yet again. All right, good comments, everyone. And with that, let's get to our closing sanity check. All right, so there is just a lot of nuttery going on. And as you've seen, we talked on the show, like the low poll numbers and low approval ratings for Democrats. I mean, even now on CNN and MSNBC, you are seeing Democrats go on almost in a panic. Like, what are we going to do? Things are not going well. There's no clear leader of the party. People are acting insane. And I really do believe that the best strategy for Republicans is just to sit back and watch it happen. And in fact, Senator John Kennedy, who we love when he has a good one-liner on Fox News, says that is exactly the plan.
No honest person whose IQ is above his age doesn't believe that that biological sex doesn't exist, but they do. That's what I mean when I say they're deeply weird. Our Republican secret plan for dealing with the Democrats is called Operation Let Them Speak.
Great plan, great strategy. That has been our closing sanity check. That has been today's episode of Undivided. Thank you to all of our subscribers who help support the show. The show is fan-funded. So if you've been a freeloader and you'd like to support the show, we would happily have you. undividedpod.com. Just click on the little button that says support the show. And if you're a first responder, veteran, or member of the military, you can use the promo code USA and get 30% off your first year of Undivided, which is the least we can do. Probably not enough, honestly, but that's all Patreon will let us do is 30%. But anyway, we'll be back tomorrow with a new episode of Politics Unpacked, and we have what I think is going to be a pretty heavy episode of Sundays with Subscribers. The family of one of the victims of Timothy Pauley, a mass murderer released by Governor Jay Inslee on his way out of office, is going to join us. So we'll have that coming up on Sunday. Okay, toodaloo. Have a fantastic weekend. All the things. Drink Chardonnay, which is totally not just something lonely housewives do. Everyone does it, and it's perfectly fine. Rosé, sparkling, whatever. Okay, bye.